Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So the reason I wanted to record today's video is just to analyze and put into context some videos that I came across a couple of days ago. And it was just, I feel like I need to do a series on these videos that I saw. So the article that I'm going to do today, and I'm going to review and go through and present to my audience, I had already made a reference to this same article, maybe in a video a couple of months back, but today I'm going to cover the entire article because it speaks to two or three videos that I came across in these last few days. And I says, wow, it's amazing. I mean, the title of this article, it just speaks volumes because so many Black Brazilians are speaking about their experiences these days. We'll say just with the overall ascension of Black Brazilians into more, we'll say, middle class settings. Um, if you followed the racial situation in Brazil, you know that in some ways it's very similar to what we've experienced in the United States. There's this idea in the mainstream society that says Black people are supposed to hold certain positions in society and not in others. So then when you come across Black people who are not part of the stereotype or the lower classes where you expect them to be, then there's a sort of discomfort. So in the last, we'll say 15 years, there have been just perhaps tens of thousands of Black Brazilians who have been leaving the stereotypical quote unquote places where Black people are expected to be seen. And they're moving into areas that generally, for most of Brazil's history, was overwhelmingly dominated with people who were had white skin or something close to white. Middle class society in Brazil is always expected to have a white face. So then when Black people come along and challenge that to say we have our place in the sun as well, society does not really accept that. And it's a contradiction on so many different levels because Brazil for so long just denied that it was racist. It denied that people had racist attitude, even though this has been documented since at least the 1940s. Then when people didn't deny it was racism, then they would say, well, if you guys improve your lot in life, if you get better jobs, you get education, you move into better neighborhoods, go to better schools, get better jobs, then you won't have this problem. And that's shown not to be true as well. So this is to introduce the next few videos that I'm going to do, I wanted to introduce it by giving it context with today's article. Again, something that I reviewed a couple months back, but today I'm going to go over the whole article. Okay. So the video is called Successful Black Brazilians Bother People with Racist Attitudes and Are Proof of Social Change. Okay. So before I get into this, make sure you like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell. With that said, let's get into today's article, the article for today, the video for today, rather. So as I've said, the position of Blacks in society, Black people are expected to serve a certain role in Brazilian society, and that's the lower rung of society, and they're expected to always stay there. This is the quote unquote place where Black people are given the place that's reserved by Brazilian society. As much as Brazil has denied that there's ever been legal segregation, and I haven't seen any signs of legal segregation, but socially accepted racial segregation has always existed. The idea, this lady that I knew that was from this town in Rio de Janeiro called Três Rios, when she moved to Sao Paulo in the 50s, she told me, Mark, when I moved to Sao Paulo in the 1950s, Black people were not allowed in the movie theater. This is what she said. I run into the situation with social elevators where if Black people go into an apartment building, a solidly middle class apartment building, they're expected to go in through the social elevator, which is where the help goes. Cleaning women, the cooks, the maids, anybody who's serving residents of that apartment are expected to take the social elevator, whereas people who live there and their guests are supposed to, the service elevator, I'm sorry. Black people are automatically, if they're in middle class apartments, they're expected to go into the service elevator because they're expected to be serving somebody who lives there. What happens when you're a black person who lives in that apartment and you don't want to, hey, I live here. Why are you sending me to the service elevator? The social elevator is supposed to be for people who live there and their guests who are coming there to visit. So can you imagine you go into an apartment building and you're being steered to get into the service elevator because you're assumed to be the help? This still goes on today. So when you run across black people in in social ascension, they have education, they earn good money, they live in good neighborhoods. Brazilian society like gasp for air, like what? What is this black doing here? So regardless of their social status, which they have fought, a lot of people are the first in their families to go to college, have, we'll say just better paying jobs. Society continues to reject these people and say, no, you don't belong here. So as much hard work as they've done as much studying, the accolades that they've gotten, the educations that they receive, society still says, no, you don't belong here. And just numerous examples. As I get into this article, I'm going to just show some pictures and articles over the last few years that highlight what's going on in Brazil. Okay. So let's just get into this for today. This is the cover that I took for today's video. It says here, Novas Faces de Negritude, meaning new faces of blackness. This was an article in the Econômico Valor magazine. I don't think it was on the cover, but it was an article, and it was just talking about the change in faces of black representation. So a lot of these people are well-to-do. I don't know all of the people in these pictures, but I know a few of them. One lady, Rafaela Martins, is a publicist. Maria Gal, I think this is Maria Gal. She's an actress and filmmaker. Fernando Montenegro is a market research executive. Patricia Santos, where is Patricia? This is Patricia Santos right here. She's an executive of a human resources firm. AD Jr. is a digital influencer and activist. That's this guy here. Lelia Luz is in public relations. Ricardo Gonçalves is an IT executive, and Douglas Belchior is the founder of the NGO, basically it's a black rights organization. This is him right here. He's head of Uni Afro. Everybody in activist circles knows who he is. So this is the change in face. Black Brazilians wanted to be known like, look, all of us are not poor anymore. All of us are not uneducated. So we've arrived, and you're going to have to start dealing with this. I did a video a couple months back that was probably the most popular video on my channel. And actress Thais Araújo was talking about this. Brazil doesn't know how to deal with black people when they're on the same footing with people who are in better positions, or people who have for years been in better positions. And when they come across black people who don't hold their head down, who bow in the face of whiteness and this type of thing, white Brazilians don't know how to deal with it. So this is really what the whole point of today's article is. Successful blacks bother racists and their proof of social change. Despite structural racism, there is no shortage of pretos and pardos, meaning black and brown people, with stories of overcoming adversity and building outstanding careers. Today's piece is by Ana Paula Lisboa. It is also a symbol of change, a change that is underway so that whites are not the only ones in decision-making positions, according to the researcher Cida Bento, this lady here. Cida Bento has done a lot. She does a lot of reporting and exposing the job market, the inequalities in the job market. I have been reading her website, CEERT, the website. A lot of stuff I would read there just to keep myself up to date on what was going on in Brazil. She's also led the way on analyzing how whiteness works in Brazil. So this is Cida Bento. So, story. Since a historical and structural racism permeates all spaces of Brazilian society, the obstacles that the black and brown population faces to reach prominent positions are of a great proportion. The overcoming of this barrier happens due to a lot of effort. Now, I'm going to come back and talk about all of the pictures that I have over this article so you can understand the context. It takes a lot of vigor to deal with the challenges that exist in the labor market in general, and also the challenges imposed by racism in Brazil, the last Western country to abolish slavery. Even when they are part of the same social class, or when they have had access to education at the same level, blacks and whites are faced with different difficulties. There is no shortage of pretos and pardos, again, black and brown, who have succeeded in the most diverse niches and are examples of overcoming. The change is underway so that there are more and more cases like this. However, this change often generates controversy and a lack of acceptance. That's because successful Blacks bother racists. And it really has become annoying, says Sita Bento, coordinator and co-founder of the Center for Study of Labor Relations and Inequalities, or CEERT, C-E-E-R-T as it's called. Women, when they started to reach leadership position, also bother men. For a long time, men didn't want to deal with women as bosses, she compares. Psychologist, master and doctor in psychology, she observes that the racial change and progress will always bother people because there is a fear of loss of privileges. The white identity is strengthened when the white can be a reference point for what is human. When this other, the Black person, appears in an equal position, there is a discomfort, she analyzes. White people, even if they are poor and have limitations, they are one step ahead. When a quote unquote inferior, and I say this in quotation marks, appears on an equal footing with him or her, the white loses some of that imaginary superiority in his or her condition as a universal human being. She says, he, and I'll say she in general, doesn't like to meet Blacks in spaces that would in theory be white, such as a university, she explains. As racism is present in all spheres of life and society, it's common to find Black people tired and fed up of having to impose themselves and fight against it. We are tired of so many things, says Sita. She pointed out the university setting. 20 years ago, it was just common. The university campuses were usually held, the vast majority of the student body and, most colleges and universities were held, they were people who were white or something close to white. So with the affirmative action programs of the last few decades, you've seen a lot more, we'll say, people of color that have been entering these college campuses, and people are just, they can't hide their discomfort. Like, where are all of these Black people coming from? Okay. Keeping it moving within institutions, affinity groups or racial discussion helps a lot, as they allow to concentrate demands, which doesn't mean that everything they ask for will be accepted by the leadership, but it is a first step. In addition to concentrating demands for the competent sectors, organized groups strengthen Blacks through collectivity. The institution needs to take responsibility, but it only does so when groups start to demand and take on issues of gender and race discrimination. In large companies, this type of initiative is beginning to be common. In corporations that don't have this type of service, it's possible to start. So this is Sita Bento's book, O Pacto da Branquitude, which means the pact of whiteness. Okay. Sita was listed by The Economist magazine in 2015 as one of the 50 most influential professionals in the world in the field of diversity. Born in Sao Paulo and the daughter of a driver and a servant, she was the first in the family to get a college degree. Her doctoral dissertation from the University of Sao Paulo from 2002, I'm going to translate this: Narcissistic Pacts and Racism, Whiteness and Power in Business Organizations and Public Power, explored manifestations of white raciality or whiteness in the discourse of human resources managers. The work sought to understand how racial inequalities are reproduced in work relationships and organizations. Exclusions happen if there was a pact among whites, called by Sita the narcissistic pact of whiteness, which implies denying and avoiding racial discussions with a view toward maintaining racial privileges. The researcher explains that the narcissistic pact of whiteness is a pact of domination, of relationships of domination that aims to privilege and reserve the best spaces in whatever type of institution, public or private, for equals or whites. The effects of this are wide open in the selections and the promotions and in all the processes. Okay. Thus, a context is created in which, on the one hand, there is a preference and a tendency to trust quote unquote equals, to believe that it will work with other whites. On the other hand, there is a tendency to leave out those who, in their imagination, are considered bad, incompetent, ugly, and dangerous. It's possible to overcome this view within organizations. The first step, teaches Sita Bento, is to recognize this place of whiteness and its consequences. Many companies, however, deny it. They claim that a meritocratic system works there. To occupy certain places in the institutions, a big boost from meritocracy is having a relationship with those who have occupied these spaces throughout their lives, comments Sita. So in other words, what she's saying here, a lot of the pushback against so many Black Brazilians moving into more prominent positions in society is that, oh, we have meritocracy here. If you can't cut it, if your credentials are not good enough, we're not going to hire you here. But Oftentimes that's being used as a mask to just say we only hire people who look like the people who are already here, and then hiding behind the idea of meritocracy. When, for example, numerous studies coming from universities after a decade and a half, 2 decades of quotas have shown that Black people who go to college and universities on the quota system, they often get grades as good as or better than those who entered the university without quotas. So this is what I'm saying. It's a smokescreen to hide behind the idea of meritocracy when in reality it's just a rejection of non-white people. Okay. Let me see here. Okay, again, I'm going to get back to these pictures when I finish with this article. The good news is that more people are seeking racial consciousness, and there are anti-racist whites collaborating to change the picture. The percentage of whites making efforts to change is growing. This is a movement of questioning homogenous places that is not fashionable. It is continuous. There was one article I remember doing a few years ago where there was I forget the guy's name and the company that he worked for, but he was white and he was speaking out on, or basically putting his, just letting people know, like, look, I hire people based on what I believe, how they're a good fit. If I believe that they're adequate to work in this company, I'm going to hire them regardless of what they look like. That made big news because people need to hear that. There are people, white people in power who understand, like, look, this is a racist system. We're rejecting these people based on what they look like instead of how good they are. So he wanted to make a point and say, no, I hire people based on if I think they're good for the job, not based on what they look like. The effects of this increased awareness raising needs to materialize institutionally in company rules, in recruitment and selection processes. It's necessary to be humble to know that using the same selection process that has always selected whites will not necessarily select Blacks, warns Cita Bento. We are changing and we need to support these changes. A society for all of us requires that institutions become more democratic and turn to the meaning of life in society, which involves well-being and cooperativeness. Decision-making places have historically been occupied by whites. When a quote-unquote different one, who has always been excluded, occupies that position, it subverts the structure. People and companies are afraid that they will make different decisions, she notes. According to Cita, Blacks, because they have always been on the margins of society, are able to look at institutions critically. Thus, they are also able to bring a more humanitarian look and not exclusively focus on results and profits, but thinking about solidarity, coexistence, and well-being. In Cita Bento's analysis, the damage caused by structural racism institutionally is very similar in public and private organizations. The detail is that the Black and peripheral population most commonly has access to public services, which generates greater damage to the citizen in this sphere. The more the institution finds it difficult to deal with inequality within it, the more difficult it will be to serve a diverse audience. Okay, so I want to, again, put some of this into context. Let's talk about some of these pictures first of all. Okay, so this is Cita Bento, who was quoted throughout the article. These are students, I believe, at the University of Juiz de Fora, which is a city in Minas Gerais. So it was a campaign discussing the visibility of Black people in the university setting. This is an article from a few years ago, looks like 2021. I actually have this article on the blog, blackbraziltoday.com. It says, for the first time, 3 Black Brazilian diplomats hold down positions in Washington. So these are 3 Black Brazilian diplomats who are representing Brazil in Washington. It was the first time this ever happened. I did an article on this a couple of months ago. Black Sisters-in-Law, it's a unique or a singular initiative that brings together 3,000 Black women lawyers who are working for equality. So these women, they recently made a trip over to Angola where they met forces with Black Angolan women who are also lawyers. And this group is bringing together 3,000 Black women lawyers between Brazil and Angola. So these are just a few of the women in that group. Combating racism gains force with collectives of Black liberal professionals. So you got groups that bring together architects, doctors, psychologists, publicity people, journalists, and Black filmmakers. So Black people are coming together to put collectives because the numbers that they're growing allows them to become collectives that make them more powerful in speaking for Black people in certain positions where they were never represented. So they see now, as we're growing in numbers, we need to have a group. that, speaks for the things that we want from society. So there's numerous groups like this there that's formed in Brazil, Black lawyers, Black doctors, Black journalists, Black psychologists. With these improvements and this ascension of the Black population, they're able to come together and join forces with other Black people in their same fields. Again, this is the book by Sita Binkel, The Pact of Whiteness. Get to know some Black doctors that you can follow on Instagram. A couple of these people I've already talked about on the blog and on the video channel. These are some recent graduates from Brazil's only Black college, the Faculdade Zumbi dos Palmares in Sao Paulo. This is Tiaguinho. He rose to fame as a singer in a popular pagode group, Pagode Samba, and now he's like a music executive. They say his sales have passed. They say he became the first Black billionaire in Brazil. I've seen numerous sources that claim this to be true. Just a decade, 15 years ago, people just knew him as a singer, but now he's a important force to be dealt with in the business world. First Black billionaire in Brazil. This is an article from Brazil's top newspaper. They pioneer in the world of business and entrepreneurialism, but they find it's lonely at the top when they get to these levels of success that most Black people will never get there. But they just talk about we'll say, obstacles that they have to deal with, being oftentimes the only Black person in the company, in a CEO position. So this is another area where there are enough Black executives that they have to talk with each other to deal with some of the obstacles that Brazil puts in their way, simply because they're Black and Brazil doesn't know how to deal with Blacks in ascension. This is a popular commercial. It might have been 6 or 7 years ago. The company is called Boticário, and they did an advertisement, a commercial that featured an all-Black family. And when this video was first posted on YouTube, the initial reactions were rejection. It was just like everybody was giving this video a thumbs down. People were asking, an all-Black family, where are the white people? Eventually the likes surpassed the dislikes, but it was amazing because in the first couple of weeks, so many people were unliking this video. And it was apparent because they weren't accustomed to seeing all Black people in a television commercial. It just speaks volumes to how Brazilians see things. Like, Black people belong at a certain place. They're not supposed to be on TV. And if you're going to have Blacks on TV, there should be more white people in that same position or in the same commercial. So they initially rejected this commercial. This is an example of what I'm talking about. How could a neguinha, and I translated it as the N-word, how's this little N-word girl live in the same apartment building as me? Black woman impeded from entering her own apartment by 2 white men. This woman has keys. She lives in this apartment. Obviously, she has a good job. She has the money to pay for that. And people were offended. Like, what is she doing here? How can this little neguinha be in the same apartment building that I live in? Right? The Price of Being Black and Successful. This was a book by popular actor and now director Lázaro Ramos, presenting a microcosm of obstacles Brazil constructs in the paths of its Black citizens. When this book came out, everybody, you see Lázaro Ramos has used half of his face and he's posing with the other half. When people started reading this book, all of them started striking the same pose because they just realized, how important this book was, just talking about his own, his upbringing, feeling he was in certain situations and areas where it was obvious people were not comfortable with his presence. So Brazil continues to reject Black people if they're out of their so-called environment or place. The color of success. With companies moving millions of dollars, Afro-Brazilian entrepreneurs overcome barriers and change the face of the game. These are just some top Black entrepreneurs. This is, I think his name is Geraldo Rufino. He has a recycling business. These 2 women run Beleza Natural. It's a hair company that started off, I think, in Rio. Now they have different locations all over the country. This is Adriana Barbosa. She started the Feira Preta, which is a Black Expo type of event that's been going on in Sao Paulo for almost 25 years now. Highly successful Black people behind some of the most successful businesses in Brazil. Again, the opportunity is there, and a lot of Black Brazilians are, finding a lot of success as entrepreneurs. Blacks that ascend socially continue to suffer racism. I think that's what this whole thing is saying right here. Social ascension in Brazil, okay, they can't fight it, but they can make it very uncomfortable when they come across Black people who are, let's see, not on the right team, we can say. I think that's what this picture is saying right here. That's what I get from it. What else we have here? A blacker middle class, families of Brazil's middle class boom. This is from 2012, and it's just showing how after the Lula administration, more and more Black people started moving into the middle class. They were starting to buy things that previously Black families just could not afford. Washing machines, dishwashers, big screen TV, video games. These are things that Black people didn't have access for a long time. This article is a revisit to the Black middle class of 1999. So that's 25 years ago. It would be intriguing to go back and read this particular. It was a magazine cover. Veja is one of the country's top magazine, kind of like a Time or Newsweek. This is from 1999, the Black middle class. Just Black people moving up in Brazilian society and the issues they have to deal with a Brazil that's not ready for them. Now, that was 25 years ago. Here's an article I put up in October 2022, Get Out Monkey. In Sao Paulo, comedian musician Eddie Jr. leaves his apartment after a racist attack. Incident triggers protests in front of the apartment he was living in. So this woman started verbally attacking him, going after him like, you don't belong here, get out of here, you monkey. Her and her son were seen on a security camera standing outside the door of his apartment. The guy had a broken bottle in his hand. It led to a protest. Like, why? He's outside of the apartment, Eddie Jr.'s apartment, and here he has a knife in his hand. It's the question, what's the problem here? Why do people have a problem? And I'm not going to answer the question. I mean, it's obvious that this is the type of attitude that mainstream Brazilian society has always had with Black people. And I argue, and a lot of others have argued, Black people don't really experience racism until they get into the middle class where they're really not wanted. In an episode of Elevator Racism, delivery man is prevented from using the building's social elevator by a resident there. This guy gets on the social elevator instead of the service elevator, as I was speaking on in the beginning of this video, and this woman wouldn't let him get on the elevator. He's Black. She assumes he has to get on the social elevator. So this is a new article. This is something that goes on in Brazil all the time. Harks back to 1993, when this young lady in this picture, I think I have a bigger picture here, she was attacked by this man and his mother for holding up the elevator. They assumed she was a maid. Why are you holding up the elevator, and why are you on a social elevator? You're a neguinha. You belong on the service elevator. They didn't realize that this woman was the daughter of the mayor of the governor of one of the states in Brazil. They made a big mistake. This whole article is just talking about Black people being impeded from doing something that they should have access to. Student suffers racism within a building in Salvador. The same thing happened to this guy right here. A white resident in the building that he lived in was trying to stop him from getting on the elevator because she didn't believe he belonged there. So these attitudes are something that Brazil can connect with this movie, Histórias Cruzadas, the movie that we called The Help. It resonated with a lot of Black Brazilians because it's always assumed that Black Brazilians are the help. Okay. Then the last thing I'm going to just talking about, skin color continues to influence social position in Brazil. Just says that white Brazilians still continue to see Black Brazilians as something that's inferior, so as we don't have to treat them as our equals. So I wanted to just highlight this video today and this article from a few years ago, because it's going to speak to the next few videos that I have coming up, because some of these videos that I just saw, I'm like, wow, this is crazy that people still feel this way. But this is Brazil today. So I'm just saying, I love Brazil, lived there for 9 years, been involved in Brazil for 25 years. But if I can speak on problems that exist in the United States, and I see the similarities that happen in Brazil, so just be aware of that for anybody who's traveling to the country. So anyway, I'm going to wrap the video up here. I want to ask you to comment on this video. What did you think? Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell you'll know when I put up a new video. And with that said, I'm going to end the video here. Request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post.